Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So now that we are fully in the dead of the offseason, basically for the next 4 to 5 weeks until training camp and all that preseason starts up, we really can't do much except rampantly speculate about next season. So I decided to ask you guys on my Instagram to give me some of your hot takes for next season. I love to hear what you guys think, your boldest predictions, and I'm going to tell you whether you're absolutely out of your mind or if I think that there's some truth to what you potentially predict. So we're going to go through this right now. I'm definitely going to do this as a weekly series once we get into the regular season, but I haven't done one of these in like 2 to 3 weeks since I've done the off-season one talking about the draft and free agency. So we're going to look at your hot takes for the 2024-2025 season. Without further ado, let's get into it. Up first from Aaron. He says the Canucks are this year's Devils. Trendy cup pick who misses the playoffs. And I get what he means to a degree. The fact that the Canucks kind of came out of nowhere last season, amazing start, ended up winning the Pacific Division, winning a round in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I definitely see the parallels, but where I see such a drastic difference between the two teams is the New Jersey Devils were heading into last season with Akira Schmid and Vitek Vanacek as their goalie tandem. You compare that to the Vancouver Canucks, Thatcher Demko has solidified himself kind of as a for sure top 6 goalie in the NHL in the last 4 years outside of kind of the 2022-2023 season. He's been pretty consistent, so I think that is such a stark difference. With the Devils, there was such a glaring weakness in terms of their goaltenders. They didn't have a legit starter. So although I think that the Canucks probably aren't going to win the Pacific Division, definitely, most likely not, considering the Oilers, the additions that they made, I could see them be a wild card team. I think that would be kind of a hot take, but in terms of missing the playoffs altogether, I'm not sure if multiple teams are going to be able to jump them this season. I don't think that the LA Kings or the Vegas Golden Knights had that impressive of off seasons as well. So I think maybe a wild card team, maybe the third best team in the Pacific Division, to miss the playoffs entirely like a New Jersey Devils and completely sputter like they did. I'm not sure. And also you got to realize the New Jersey Devils' Dougie Hamilton injury was massive. So I get what you mean, but I can't fully say that they're going to go full New Jersey Devils. That was just like next level. Next up, Jumper LMAO says Flyers tank and Torts gets fired and goes to Toronto. I'm not sure he's going to go to Toronto. I think they're going to give Craig Berube like at least 2 seasons. But when looking at this, yeah, they're kind of at this weird spot where the start of last season, you thought maybe this team is legit, but they collapsed towards the end of the season. In this season, they're kind of set up to be not quite a playoff team, especially with the way that the Capitals improved. My New York Islanders only added the Devils added a shit ton. They're pretty consensusly either the 7th or 8th best team in the Metro. They're probably ahead of the Columbus Blue Jackets, but they're in the same tier as like the Pittsburgh Penguins, which isn't that encouraging. So I think Danny Briere kind of wants to rebuild, but with John Tortorella as his coach, it's kind of hard because although he's maybe not the best coach in the NHL, he can elevate kind of maybe a lackluster roster talent like they had this most recent season. So I think if they get off to a slow start, I definitely could see Danny Briere start trading some serious pieces on this team and kind of entering a rebuild, retool, and then Torts gets fired and goes to an actual contender and can compete at a high level, because I think the Philadelphia Flyers, maybe not a full teardown, but right now I don't think that they have the pieces to put around Matvei Michkov to put up an actual contender in 3 to 4 years. So I definitely get what you mean when you're saying that. Next up, Bobby says the Panthers only make a wild card spot. I can agree with this. I can definitely see when looking at the Boston Bruins, Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, I could see them finishing ahead in the regular season ahead of the Florida Panthers. I think they're a better team than the Florida Panthers, not necessarily, but I think Florida might not be as engaged in terms of the start of the regular season. There's still back-to-back years of going deep in the playoffs that does take a toll on your body. I think we could see something similar to the Vegas Golden Knights that won the Pacific Division last year, won the Stanley Cup, and then kind of coasted during the regular season. Mark Stone went on LTIR. I don't think the Florida Panthers are going to be doing that, but I could potentially see a slow start for the Florida Panthers, but I think they're for sure a playoff team. I could see them coast, but similarly to maybe like the Tampa Bay Lightning were last year, where by mid-December, they were just locked into the number 1 wild card spot, so they didn't really care that much. They just decided to rest up, but I get what you mean. Next up, Ace80 says Erik Karlsson has a bounce back season and is at least point per game again. And yeah, I think people are underrating Erik Karlsson this season. He obviously wasn't as good as he was in 2023 when he won the Norris, but he was far better defensively his first year on the Pittsburgh Penguins. And the offense was still solid. He had 59 points. I think he's actually going to be better this season. I think he could easily get high 60s, low 70s. Full point per game might be a little bit tough because Chris Letang still has to eat to a degree, and Pedersen plays a decent amount on their back end. He's not going to be required to play 25, 26 minutes a night. But yeah, I think that he's kind of being slept on right now. He arguably could have been in my top 50 list, 41 through 50. I think he's knocking on still being a top 10 defenseman, even after last year maybe being a bit of a down year. Next up, this one's really bold. San Jose is going to finish above Seattle. That comes to us from Hands. I can see San Jose taking big steps, being better than the Seattle Kraken, maybe being better than the Anaheim Ducks, just because the Ducks have so many injuries last year. If that happens again, things could go south. I'm low on the Seattle Kraken, but I still think that their floor is like a 75-ish point team. I can't see them completely tearing it down, especially after being so aggressive in the offseason. But if the cord is... If it's like, what's the Cinderella, if the magic pumpkin, or if the carousel turns back into a pumpkin, I have no clue what I'm saying right now. If that was kind of just a flash in the pan one season and their goaltender tandem goes to shit, yeah, I could see them in the mid-70s. Do the San Jose Sharks have what it takes to be a 70-point team? I don't quite think so, especially with that defense core, but I think Seattle is most likely going to be a bottom 10 team next year. Next up, Marty Yankee says Kappo Kakko will be a 50-point scorer. We do this every offseason, it seems, like Ranger fans try to be like, this is the year. You got Alexis Lafreniere. Alexis Lafreniere is a stud. Maybe we were wrong on that. I never called him a bust, but like he's turning into a stud. You guys were right about saying, oh, he's going to turn around eventually. Just give up on Kappo Kakko. Last year, he went from 15 minutes a night all the way down to 13. Laviolette, I don't think is going to give him a massive opportunity in terms of in the top 6 with Riley Smith being acquired. Just give it up, man. He's going to be a third liner this season. He's probably going to be a middle sixer for his entire career. We got something from, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Narangilla. I don't know if this is a hot take, but Stuart Skinner is the Corey Crawford of the 2020s. I get what you say to a degree. He's got to win some Stanley Cups to be the Corey Crawford. I do agree in the sense that he's more so of a system goaltender. That's still disrespectful to Corey Crawford because he was a top 10 goalie in his prime, definitely propped up by being on the Blackhawks dynasty. He's not close to a Hall of Famer in my opinion, but Stuart Skinner still has multiple years of being a solid starter before you can even compare him to Corey Crawford, who I do agree is pretty overrated all time. Next up, Anthony. Reinhart doesn't score more than 30 next season, and I've harped on it a bunch of times. He did shoot 24.5%. I would bet on him going over 30, but I could see it happen considering the fact that I've already said that I could see the Florida Panthers be a wild card team, get off to a slow start. And even if he has 28 goals and let's say 45 assists for 73 points next season. The thing with Sam Reinhart is he's not just this pure goal scorer. People will be like, oh, that deal is going to age horribly. It's not just the goal scoring that they paid for. He's fantastic defensively, so he's not going to have to put up 35, 40 goals a season to be worth $8.6 million. As long as he gives you, hopefully, like low 30 goals and 80-ish points, he's going to be worth that 8.6 because of his defensive impact. But I do agree, we probably are in for a down year from Sam Reinhart after he had 57 goddamn goals. Something about Lindholm pens. I'm not going to pronounce that. Olmark says Elias Lindholm has over 70 points next season. And I said this multiple times. If he's playing with David Pastrnak and doesn't have at least 70 points next season, that contract is freaking horrible. I understand if he's playing on the second line, say Zacha plays with David Pastrnak, but if you paid this guy this massive amount of money, he better be getting you 70 points if he's playing with a guy that has had back-to-back seasons of at least 110 points. So, yeah, honestly, if you told me that they're going to be stuck to the hip in terms of Pasta and Lindholm, I'd set the over-under at like 72, 73. That's not really saying that I think Lindholm is a stud. It's more so that David Pastrnak just is such a fantastic offensive player. Next up, Ben says, Ducks stay healthy, stay in the race for a wild card. I think they are a potential candidate to take a pretty big step this season, again, because of the injuries that they had last year. If they can stay fully healthy, if Lucas Dostal can take another step, John Gibson maybe returns to his 2017, 2018 form, I think that they could be a pretty good team. Do I think that they're going to be actually a wild card team? No, but I get what you mean. I think come February, they could be 5 points outside of the wild card, playing important hockey. That's what the goal should be this season. 75 to 80 point team, maybe 80, low 80s, but I don't think that they're remotely close to being a wild card team, even though the West kind of falls off after like the 9th or 10th best teams. Next up, Julian says Detroit last in the Atlantic and Yzerman is fired. I wouldn't go last in the Atlantic. I think the Montreal Canadiens probably are the worst team heading into next season. But I agree. They were a 91-point team last year. I think they're going to take a step back given their defense core was not really addressed. And they arguably got worse by losing Jake Wallman and bringing in Eric Gustafsson. On top of the goaltending, you're relying on a Cam Talbot at 36, 37 years old to do a lot. So I agree. If they have a down year, I'm not sure they're going to fire Steve Yzerman if they're an 85-point team. It's possible, but I think he would get the benefit of a doubt of another year considering he is a franchise legend. But I agree that the pressure is going to be pretty high on Steve Yzerman because you took that big step last year, and I don't want to call it lucky, but when looking at their goals scored above expected, they definitely shot the shit out of the puck. So if they come down to earth a little bit this year, he could definitely be on a hot seat. Jack Hughes from Joel Sully. Jack Hughes, runner-up for the Hart with 125 points. I had this exact same energy coming into last season. I said he was going to finish third behind McDavid and Matthews. I'm not quite ready to go there. I think that he definitely has the build of a potential Hart candidate, by far the best forward on his team, and a team that is going to take a massive step. And part of that is going to be because Jack Hughes is fully healthy. So I don't hate him in terms of betting on him on the Hart. I'm not quite ready to say that he's going to have 125 points because he only has one season really of staying healthy, which was 2023, where he played 78 games. But I do agree that some people are forgetting how good this guy is, and I probably set his over-under, if he's fully healthy, at like 107, 108 points. Next up, we got Aiden Hill will be an overrated goalie coming into the season. This comes to us from Adon. And yeah, Aiden Hill's a pretty interesting case because fantastic in the playoffs for the Vegas Golden Knights, wins the Stanley Cup, has an amazing start to last year, but then gets hurt. He has been pretty injury prone, and he comes back and he's not that good. In this season, he's not going to have a Logan Thompson to back him up. He's going to have another very sporadic guy in an Ilya Samsonov. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. I still think he's a good goalie, but I agree. Him being relied on to be the legit number one this season, most likely, it could potentially go south for the Vegas Golden Knights, and they're paying him a pretty decent amount at $4.9 million. We got something about Jake Gensel from Jack. Gensel fits like a glove in Tampa. They finished top 2 in the Atlantic. And yeah, dude, I don't really know like where I am exactly on the Tampa Bay Lightning because you look at it, I think their moves, I think they might slightly be a better team. When looking at Sergachev, off that injury, he's probably going to be around the same as Ryan McDonough, who had a big bounce back year. I still think Sergachev was a more valuable piece. But they also got, why am I blanking on his name? JJ Moser in that deal. I like that Sergachev deal in terms of the fact that they got Ryan McDonough and then got an absolute haul for Sergachev. So I don't think that was a massive downgrade. And I think that the upgrade of Jake Gensel over Steven Stamkos is going to be pretty apparent. What it's going to come down to is Andrei Vasilevsky still a top 5 goalie? Because last year he had a 900 coming off that injury. If you can get him back to a 915, on paper, this should be a 105, maybe even 110-point team. So I'm starting to maybe kind of convince myself a little bit on the Tampa Bay Lightning in terms of being a legit good contending team, considering they do have that top end talent. I still very shallow of a team. They're one injury away from things getting very risky, but I starting to believe in the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm starting to think that they can be a legit threat in the Eastern Conference that really isn't that intimidating compared to last season. Then we got another Florida one sticking in Florida from Michael. He says, Forsling Norris finalist, now that he'll most likely QB the power play. When looking at Forsling, I believe he's been about a half a point per game guy, and yeah, that's been without a lot of power play time. Montour and Ekblad kind of ate up that power play time. So with Montour gone, I think Forsling is going to take another step. Now, in order to be a Norris finalist, you probably got to get to 60 points in today's NHL. Will Gustav Forsling get to that? Does he have the relations, the name recognition with the voters, the reputation that some people have to build before they finish high in a Norris race? Not sure that's the case, but I think that in the same way Hampus Lindholm really broke out in that 2023 season, I think we could potentially see that from a Gustav. Well, Hampus Lindholm was a very good player, but that 2023 season was by far his best year. I think we could potentially see that with Gustav Forsling. We got this from Landon. Canes win the President's Trophy. And yeah, although the Canes definitely got worse, I think people forget just how good of a regular season coach Rod Brind'Amour is. I'm off the train of him being the best coach in the NHL just because he hasn't got it done in the playoffs, especially not adjusting early on in that series against the New York Rangers, especially with the special teams. But when looking at him in the regular season, this guy just consistently puts out top 5 regular season teams in the NHL. So although I agree that they probably not going to win the Stanley Cup, probably not going to make the Eastern Conference Finals, I think they're going to surprise some people in terms of, people be like, they're going to be a wild card team. They might miss the playoffs altogether. Rod Brind'Amour doesn't really miss the playoffs, and he's put up fantastic seasons with not that talented of teams in the past. 2020, 2021, even 2022, 2023, and 2024, they were very talented, but in prior years, they have been top 5 in the regular season while not being the most talented team on the paper. We got a couple more to go through. We got one about the Montreal Canadiens. Habs make the playoffs. I think that's a little bit premature. I think they have one more year of kind of being a bottom 10 team. You look at the defense score, unless Lane Hudson is an absolute stud, that's probably a bottom 10 defense score. Forward core is okay. Goalie tandem's okay. But again, nothing really impresses me that much with the Montreal Canadiens. I like their pieces. I think they're going to be a good team in 2 to 3 years, but they shouldn't be rushing anything. They shouldn't be spending at the deadline or doing that just to make a wild card. I don't really see that happening. Columbus, in the same vein from Jake, Columbus wild card. Probably not going to happen, man, unless that goalie unless Merzlikins turns into like rookie year Merzlikins, where he was a very, very good goalie. I don't really see that happening. The forward core is still very young. You would need Johnny Gaudreau to turn back the clock to his Flames days. I don't see it happening. Then we got something from Tori. Johnston and Harley is better than Raymond and Sider. I think I might agree with that. I'm not going to lie. I think Raymond might be better. I think Wyatt Johnston's going to be eventually better than Raymond. It's weird. Next season, I probably would have Lucas Raymond over Wyatt Johnston and Moritz Seider, Thomas Harley. It's kind of a toss-up. I think next season I would still go with the Red Wings, but down the line, I do like Wyatt Johnston and Harley maybe a little bit more than the Red Wings top 2, which just goes to show how fantastic the Dallas Stars just future is in general, considering they still have Miro Heiskanen and Jason Robertson. But yeah, that's an interesting hypothetical. I'm higher on Wyatt Johnston than others, though. Sticking in the Central Division from James, Avs missed the playoffs and Utah gets in the divisional seed. I do think that the Avs are a very shallow team, especially if Nichushkin, Lord knows what's going on with him, and Landeskog never comes back. They are a Mikko Rantanen, Nathan McKinnon, or Cale Makar injury away, like serious 2 to 3 month injury, from not being a playoff lock. I think they will make the playoffs. Those guys had stayed decently healthy. Makar gets hurt like 5 to 10 games every single season, but he kind of avoids massive injuries. But when looking at that, I could see it happening. Utah, I think, is going to take a massive step from being a 75-point team. I think they're going to be in the wild card race, but I think it's more so likely that like a Winnipeg Jets fall out of a playoff spot and LA Kings fall out of a playoff spot than, say, a Colorado Avalanche. And then lastly, from Gertz4, this one really, really piqued my interest. If Calgary gets the first overall pick, they take Anton Frundell or Porter Martone over Hagens in fear of a McGrody-Fox situation. And yeah, I get what you mean with that. When looking at the track record of American players playing on the Calgary Flames, if I was Craig Conroy, I wouldn't be frothing at the mouth of banking my entire rebuild on James Hagens, who could potentially leave down the line and say, screw it, I'm out of here. I hope that he wouldn't do that for the sake of the Calgary Flames fans. But yeah, if going into draft night, they don't really see that big of a difference. Like Celebrini, you're taking Celebrini no matter what. Bedard, you're taking Bedard number 1. You wouldn't even factor in those things because they were just such fantastic prospects, and if you had to trade them down the line, you would have got a haul. But if they think that James Hagens is a 8.8 out of 10 prospect and Frundell is an 8.6, Martone's 8.6 as well, do you maybe take the guy, Martone for sure, a Canadian guy that is probably going to be there for the next 10 to 15 years? I think that's definitely something to consider. Hagens isn't although I think he's going to be a star in the NHL, he isn't some can't miss near generational prospect. We'll see how he does at Boston College. Maybe he earns that reputation of a Celebrini, but that's definitely something to check out. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about all of these? What's your take on them? Which ones are your favorite hot takes? And I'll be seeing the next one.